The FBI agents arrived at 6:47 on a Friday morning, 12 of them plus 4 investigators from FinCEN filing through the marble lobby of Harborstone Tower like a quiet parade. They showed their warrants to the security guard, a man named Phil, who'd worked the front desk for 9 years, and later said he'd never seen his own hand shake before. They took the elevators to the 31st floor. Victor Hale, chief financial officer of Crestfall Capital, was sitting at his desk with a steaming cup of coffee when 2 agents walked through his door. They read him his Miranda rights while he sat in the Italian leather chair he'd chosen himself. $12,000 imported, the kind of chair that says, "I've arrived." 3 years earlier, in a hiring round so routine it didn't even require executive approval, Crestfall Capital had brought on a staff accountant named Elena Marsh. Single mother, no CPA, no connections, a salary so low it barely registered as a rounding error in Victor's annual bonus. He never imagined she would be the one to bring him down. But this story doesn't begin with handcuffs. It begins with a number that didn't add up and a woman who couldn't look away. Elena Marsh worked on the 28th floor of Harborstone Tower in a corner desk wedged between a filing cabinet and a window that overlooked nothing but the parking garage. She was a staff accountant at Crestfall Capital, one of Boston's most aggressive hedge funds, the kind of place where people on the upper floors drank single-origin coffee and people on the lower floors drank whatever came out of the machine. In 3 years, Elena had never set foot on the 31st floor. She had never spoken to anyone in the executive suite. To the people who ran Crestfall Capital, she was employee ID 4471, a line in the payroll spreadsheet. That was fine with Elena. She didn't need to be noticed. She needed to be employed. Her phone buzzed against the desk. A text from Mrs. Delgado, the babysitter. "Lily asking when mommy coming home. She drew you a picture." 2 people in front of a big house with flowers. Elena looked at the message for 3 seconds, turned the phone face down, and went back to her spreadsheet. Not because she didn't love her daughter, because she understood with the clarity that poverty teaches you early that love without a paycheck is just a prettier word for helplessness. Now, before we go any further, I want you to sit with that image for a second. A man in a $12,000 chair getting read his rights, and 3 floors down from where he used to work, a woman who made $22 an hour, the one who put him there. This story is about a lot of things. Money laundering, corporate betrayal, the FBI. But at its core, it's about something much simpler. It's about what happens when someone at the very bottom of a system decides that a wrong number matters more than their own survival. And if you think you know how this ends, I promise you, you don't. Not yet. It was 7 p.m. The entire 28th floor was dark except for her screen. She was reconciling Q3 expense reports, not her job. Her colleague, David Huang, had quit 2 weeks earlier, walked out on a Tuesday afternoon, left his security badge on the keyboard. Resignation email timestamped 2:14 p.m. No one explained why. No one replaced him. His workload migrated to Elena's desk the way water finds the lowest point. She didn't complain. Complaining required someone to complain to. Elena got home at 10:22. The apartment was small, a 1-bedroom and a triple-decker in Dorchester, the kind of place where you could hear the upstairs neighbor's TV through the ceiling, and the radiator clanked every night like something was trapped inside it. But it was clean, right, Wayne? Lily's drawings covered the refrigerator door, layered on top of each other, held up by pizza delivery magnets. Lily was asleep on the couch, one sock missing. Mrs. Delgado's blanket draped over her small body. On the nightstand was the drawing from the text. 2 stick figures holding hands in front of a house with a red door and yellow flowers. At the top, in wobbly 6-year-old handwriting, "Our house someday." Elena sat on the edge of the bed and looked at that drawing for a long time. $400. That was what she had left each month after rent, food, bus pass, babysitter, and the $3,200 monthly payment to Whitmore Gardens, the nursing home in Quincy, where her mother Margaret lay bedridden. $400 between Elena and the kind of collapse that doesn't make the news. The quiet kind where you just stop being able to hold it together and nobody notices because nobody was watching. On Sunday, Elena borrowed a car from Mrs. Delgado's son and drove Lily to Whitmore. Lily would sit on the edge of her grandmother's bed, chattering about school with the authority of someone explaining something very important. Margaret listened, her eyes bright, even when her words came slow. Elena sat in the hallway outside, turning the latest invoice in her hands. The monthly fee had increased again, $200 more than last quarter. She folded the invoice, put it in her coat pocket, and breathed. In her desk drawer at work, Elena kept a small leather notebook. The cover was cracked along the spine, soft from years of handling. It had belonged to her father, Paul Marsh. Paul had kept books for a lumber mill in Vermont before his back gave out, and he ended up on the factory floor. On the first page, in his careful handwriting, "Numbers don't lie, Elena. Only people do." Paul died when Elena was 19. Blood clot. It traveled from his leg to his lung while he was sitting in the waiting room of a free clinic because the lumber mill owner had never filed the workers' compensation paperwork he promised. Elena's father had trusted that man for 12 years, looked him in the eye every morning, believed every word. Elena learned two things from her father's death. First, the people above you will always protect themselves before they protect you. Second, a number on a page can be the difference between someone living and someone dying. I want to pause here because this detail matters more than you might think. Elena's father didn't die of a blood clot. He died of a broken promise. A man who shook his hand every morning for 12 years simply never filed the paperwork. And that right there is the engine that drives everything Elena does next. Because when you've watched someone you love die because a powerful man didn't keep his word, you develop a very specific skill. You stop trusting people and you start trusting numbers. Numbers don't shake your hand and lie. Numbers don't promise to file your paperwork. Numbers just are. And when they don't add up, Elena Marsh is the kind of person who cannot physically, psychologically, cannot look away. That's not bravery. That's scar tissue. And it's about to change everything. The number found her on a Wednesday. She was deep in the Q3 reconciliation, matching expense entries to vendor records when she stopped. Line item $4,847, a payment of $840,000 to Meridian Strategic Partners, LLC, categorized as strategic consulting fees, Q3. Elena had never heard of the company. Standard procedure required every vendor to have a profile in the system. W-9 on file, point of contact, service agreement. She searched, nothing. Meridian Strategic Partners did not exist in any database she could access. She noted it, moved on, tried to. That same evening, running a secondary reconciliation on a subsidiary bank account, a task inherited along with David Huang's abandoned desk, she found it again. Not Meridian, a different name. Pinterest Holdings, LLC. Same amount, $840,000. Same date, same approval signature. Victor Hale, Chief Financial Officer. Two payments, identical amounts, same day, same approver. Two companies that didn't exist in any system. Elena sat very still. The fluorescent light buzzed above her the way it always did, and the 28th floor was as empty as it always was after 7 p.m. And for a moment, everything was exactly the same as it had been 10 minutes before. Except it wasn't, because Elena knew the difference. 3 years of reconciling numbers taught her to tell a careless mistake from a deliberate one. The way a jeweler tells glass from diamond, not by how it looks, but by how it behaves. Mistakes are messy. They leave trails, confused emails, corrections, sheepish follow-ups. This was clean. Two mirror image transactions routed through different names, approved at CFO level to bypass normal review. This wasn't a mistake. This was architecture. Elena screenshotted both entries, plugged in a personal USB, a cheap 16-gig stick she'd bought at CVS for Lily's school photos, and copied the files. Put the USB in her coat pocket next to her father's notebook. On the bus home, she held the USB through the fabric of her coat. Her hand was shaking, not from fear, not yet, from recognition, because Elena understood something about herself that most people never have to learn. Once she saw a number that didn't add up, she could not unsee it. She didn't sleep that night. Now let me explain what Elena just found, because this is how financial crime actually works. A shell company, or what regulators call a fictitious entity, is a business that exists only on paper. No office, no employees, no product. It's a legal ghost registered in a state like Delaware or Wyoming, where the filing requirements are so minimal you can set one up in 15 minutes with a laptop and a credit card. In money laundering, shell companies serve one purpose. They create a legitimate-looking invoice that justifies moving money. Victor Hale wasn't sloppy. He used two different shells to split the same payment, $840,000 each, because a single $1.68 million transfer would have triggered automated compliance alerts. Two payments of $840,000 from two different consulting firms, each just below the threshold that would flag a review. That's not theft, that's engineering. And Elena recognized it for what it was because she'd spent 3 years doing the one thing nobody at Crestfall Capital thought mattered, paying attention to the numbers on the 28th floor. Over the next 3 days, Elena worked her real job during daylight and her secret investigation after dark. She pulled every transaction from the past 6 quarters that Victor Hale had personally authorized, bypassing the standard 3-signature chain. 7 more. 4 different shell companies, Meridian, Pinterest, Greystone Advisory Group, and Lakeview Capital Solutions, all registered in Delaware or Wyoming. No employees, no physical addresses, none in the vendor system. Total $11.2 million. Elena stared at the numbers. She made $45,000 a year before taxes. This was 249 years of her salary, moved through ghost companies in 18 months. For the first time, she was afraid, not of the number itself, of what she had to do next. She knew corporate politics the way a mouse knows a house, from the baseboards looking up. Victor Hale had been with Crestfall Capital since its founding. Dean Calloway, head of legal and compliance, owed his entire position to Victor. The ethics hotline, the compliance office, every channel designed for reporting, all of them led back to people Victor controlled. She thought about calling a lawyer. Financial crimes attorneys charge $500 an hour. She had $400 after bills. She thought about doing nothing, going back to her spreadsheets, her bus ride, her daughter's drawings, pretending the numbers were someone else's problem. But the notebook sat in her drawer, and the words sat inside her like a stone she couldn't swallow. Numbers don't lie, Elena. So she did the bravest or the most reckless thing she'd ever done. She emailed the CEO. She wrote the email at 11 p.m., cross-legged on her bed, Lily asleep beside her. Dear Mr. Crestfall, my name is Elena Marsh, staff accountant, floor 28. I found these numbers during the Q3 reconciliation. I don't know what they mean, but I know they're not right. I'm sending them to you because I don't know who else to send them to safely. She attached the file. Her finger hovered over send for a full minute, 60 seconds. She counted them the way her father used to count when he was making a decision. Then she pressed it. She closed the laptop, lay down next to Lily, and stared at the ceiling until it turned gray with dawn. Think about what just happened. A woman making $22 an hour with $400 to her name, a bedridden mother, and a 6-year-old daughter just sent evidence of an $11.2 million fraud directly to the CEO of a $2.3 billion hedge fund. She has no lawyer, no union, no protection. If she's wrong, she loses her job. If she's right, she might still lose her job. Because in corporate America, the person who finds the fraud is almost always treated worse than the person who committed it. There's a reason whistleblowers have their own federal protection laws. And the reason is that without those laws, the system eats them alive. Elena Marsh knows this. She's lived this. Her father was eaten by the same machine, and she pressed send anyway. That's not recklessness. That's a woman who's already lost everything once and decided that losing her integrity was the one thing she wouldn't survive. Nathan Crestfall had a routine. Up at 4:45 a.m., 3 miles along the Charles River, rain or shine, coffee from the pour-over setup his ex-girlfriend left behind, the only useful thing from that relationship. Then email, alone in the penthouse before anyone at Crestfall Capital had pressed an elevator button. He opened Elena's email at 5:11 a.m. His first instinct was to delete it. Then he opened the attachment. It wasn't a complaint. It was a case file. Transactions cross-referenced with dates. Approval chains mapped. Vendor database gaps documented. Every anomaly footnoted with the exact system query used to verify it. Nathan didn't call Victor, didn't call Dean Calloway. He logged into the financial system himself, something he hadn't done in a year. Every number checked out. He sat in his kitchen for 20 minutes, coffee going cold. Victor Hale, his CFO for 15 years. The man who'd stood beside him at his mother's funeral, who talked him out of selling during the 2020 crash. Nathan had told Bloomberg on camera that Victor was the person I'd trust with my life. At 7 a.m., before anyone else arrived, Nathan called Elena to the 31st floor. She'd never been up there. The elevator required a key card she didn't have. Nathan's assistant had to escort her from the lobby. Elena walked through frosted glass corridors past offices that cost more per square foot than her apartment cost per month, clutching her father's notebook against her chest like a shield. Nathan was standing behind his desk. He didn't shake her hand. He didn't smile. He said, "Do you know who you're accusing?" Elena met his eyes. "I'm not accusing anyone, sir. I'm reporting numbers." He studied her. The bargain rack blazer, the cracked notebook, the eyes that didn't look away. Later, Nathan would tell her that this was the moment he decided to believe her. Not because of the data, though the data was impeccable. Because Elena Marsh was the least strategic person he'd ever met. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me everything." She did. 40 minutes. Every transaction, every shell company, every gap, plain, precise, no decoration. When she finished, Nathan leaned back. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years. "And in 3 years, has anyone from this floor ever spoken to you?" Elena thought about it. "The elevator repairman once, but I don't think he's full-time on this floor." Nathan almost smiled. Then he made her an offer. Elena said, "I don't want a bonus. I don't want a promotion. I want you to promise me that no matter what happens, I don't get fired because I don't have a second option." "I promise," he said. Elena nodded, picked up her notebook, walked back to the 28th floor to finish reconciling Q3. They met in secret after that. Early mornings or late evenings, sometimes his office, sometimes a small coffee shop on Newbury Street. They talked through spreadsheets and transaction logs, the dry language of forensic accounting. But other things surfaced inside those conversations. Nathan learned that Elena's mother cost $3,200 a month to keep alive, that Lily drew pictures of houses they'd never live in, that Elena commuted 90 minutes each way because she couldn't afford a car. Elena learned that Nathan's penthouse had 4 bedrooms and he slept in one, that he ate Thai takeout alone at his desk most nights because there was no one at home who'd notice if he didn't come back. Neither of them talked about any of this directly. It came out sideways in the margins. A comment about bus schedules. A silence that lasted one beat too long over a bank statement. Neither acknowledged it in the way you don't acknowledge a tide coming in. You just notice your feet are wet. 3 weeks in, Elena arrived at the coffee shop and found Nathan staring out the window. He hadn't ordered. When she sat down, he said, "Do you ever wonder what the point of it all is?" Elena set her bag down. "I don't have time to wonder. I have a grocery list." Nathan turned to her. For a moment, something unguarded crossed his face. Not pity, not amusement, but recognition. The kind of look you give someone who just said the truest thing you've heard all week. "Right, Mom," he said. "Grocery list. Where do we start?" They opened the spreadsheet, but something had shifted. Not dramatically, just the room felt different when they were both in it. Victor Hale was not a careless man. 19 months of laundering, 2 external audits survived. But when the system logs flagged after-hours access to restricted records, employee ID, 4471, Elena Marsh, he felt the first cold prickle of exposure. He didn't confront Elena. He sent Dean Calloway. Dean moved a temporary desk to the 28th floor, started sitting near Elena, asking casual questions, reviewing her files. First strike. Elena was called to HR for irregularities in her Q2 reporting. Errors she hadn't made, errors inserted after her submission. She recognized it instantly. Build a file, create a paper trail, establish grounds for termination. Her father's employer had done the same thing. Second strike. Rosa Gutierrez, the building's cleaning woman, 63 years old, born in Guatemala, invisible in the way cleaning staff are invisible, pulled Elena aside in the stairwell one evening. "That lawyer man," Rosa whispered. "Mr. Calloway, he goes to your desk every night after you leave, opens your drawers, looks through everything." Elena felt the floor shift. "Thank you, Rosa." Rosa grabbed her wrist. Be careful, mija. I saw them do this before to the boy who sat at your desk. The Chinese boy, David. Same thing right before he disappeared. David Huang, who hadn't quit at all, who'd been pushed. And the question Elena never thought to ask, why David's workload ended up on her desk, suddenly had an answer. Because David's desk was where the evidence lived, and Victor needed it covered by someone who wouldn't dig. He picked wrong. What Rosa just told Elena changes the entire story. David Huang didn't quit. He was silenced, which means Elena isn't the first person to find these numbers. She's the second. The first one was removed, and right now someone is building a case to remove her too. But here's what makes Elena different from David. She's already been destroyed once. She watched the system take her father. She knows exactly how the machine works. The fabricated complaints, the paper trail, the sudden termination dressed up in HR language. She's seen this play before, and this time she's not leaving without copies. The third strike changed everything. Elena went to pick up Lily at Mrs. Delgado's and found the older woman visibly shaken. A man had come by that morning, well-dressed, polite, salt and pepper hair. Said he was Elena's colleague, asked about Lily's schedule, drop-off, pickup, whether Elena was ever late. Elena didn't need the description. Dean Calloway had gone to her daughter's babysitter. She picked Lily up, held her on her hip, walked 4 blocks to the bus stop while Lily talked about a caterpillar she'd found in the yard, completely unaware that her mother's hands were shaking. Not from cold, from a kind of rage Elena had never felt before. This was different. Elena had accepted every indignity the world offered her. Poverty, exhaustion, invisibility. She absorbed it all. But there was a line and they had just crossed it. That night, Lily asleep, Elena called Nathan. Her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone holding perfectly still so they don't shatter. They went to my daughter's babysitter. 5 seconds of silence, then Nathan, I'll arrange someone for Lily's safety and you should move temporarily. I don't need you to protect me. I need you to move faster. Nathan hired Preston and Oakley, a forensic firm out of New York. The results came back in 10 days. The 4 shell companies all fed into a single offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Total $47 million. And the money connected to a synthetic opioid distribution network that FinCEN had been tracking for 2 years. Nathan read the report at 9 p.m. Elena was there. 2 containers of Thai food on the desk. Neither of them touched it. $47 million, Nathan said. His voice was hollow. Victor was my first hire. He stood next to me at my mother's funeral. I told Bloomberg I'd trust him with my life. Elena didn't say, I'm sorry. She said, my father trusted the mill owner to file his workers' comp. The man looked him in the eye every morning for 12 years. When my dad got sick, there was no paperwork. There was nothing. Silence. Nathan looked at Elena, not at the data between them, at her. How did your father handle it, bud? He didn't. He died in a waiting room. Nathan closed the report. $47 million. Let me put that number in perspective for you. That's enough to pay Elena's salary for 1,044 years. It's enough to cover her mother's nursing home for 1,223 years. It's enough to buy the house in Lily's drawing, the one with the red door and yellow flowers, about 470 times. Victor Hale moved that much money through ghost companies to fund an opioid network while sitting 3 floors above a single mother who couldn't afford a car. That's not just crime. That's the architecture of a system where the people at the top are so insulated from the people at the bottom that $47 million can disappear and nobody notices except the woman making $22 an hour who was paying attention because nobody ever told her she was important enough to stop. Elena reached for the container of Pad CU. We should eat, she said. Wasting food is something I can't do. They ate in silence. The noodles were cold. Neither of them cared. When Elena stood to leave, she paused at the door. Nathan, whatever happens with Victor, thank you for believing me when I was just a name on the 28th floor. She left. Nathan sat alone and realized that in 38 years, no one had ever thanked him for something that simple, for just believing. Victor found out about the independent audit 3 days later. Dean Calloway had a contact at Preston and Oakley, a junior partner who owed a favor. The leak was small, but enough. Victor moved in 48 hours. He fabricated a digital paper trail, backdated emails, altered logs, forged authorizations that told a completely different story. In Victor's version, Elena had created the shell payments herself and Nathan was covering for her because of an inappropriate personal relationship. It was elegant. Two truths. Elena's after-hours access, Nathan's private meetings with her, wrapped in a lie so clean nobody would look further. Victor sent the file to Harrison Crestfall, Nathan's father, 71, officially retired but still chairman emeritus with enough board votes to be lethal. Harrison called Nathan to Greenwich, the family estate. Tell me you are not protecting a $22 an hour accountant at the expense of your oldest friend and the future of this company. Nathan tried to explain. Harrison cut him off. You have the word of an employee you didn't know existed until last month. Victor, who has been at your side for 15 years, says you've lost perspective. Companies don't die from fraud, son. They die from CEOs who can't tell the difference between a crusade and a con. Nathan left without a word. In the car, his phone buzzed. Victor. Nate, we should talk. Someone is trying to set you up. Let me help. Nathan's knuckles went white on the steering wheel, his oldest friend playing the savior while holding the knife. The next morning, he texted Elena. Things may get worse before they get better. Keep your copies safe. Elena read it on the bus. Lily sat beside her, drawing in a sketchbook, tongue out in concentration. Elena typed back, they're safe, so am I. She paused, then added, you should eat something. Nathan stared at the message. In 14 years of running a billion-dollar company, not one person had ever told him to eat. Victor moved fast. Emergency board session. Without Nathan, 3 members voted to suspend his executive authority for 30 days. Elena was terminated the same morning. Material violation of financial reporting protocols. Security walked her out. She took her father's notebook and a drawing Lily made of a rainbow. Nothing else. 12 minutes and 3 years of work were erased. Outside Harborstone Tower, November wind off the harbor, Elena stood on the sidewalk. She didn't cry. She thought, Lily, rent, nursing home, $400. Then $312 because the electricity bill was due Friday. Rosa Gutierrez found her, dropped her mop, ran outside in her smock, and pressed an envelope into Elena's hand. $300, my savings. You take it. Rosa, I can't. You take it. I know you'll pay me back. But right now you need it more than my mattress. Elena held the envelope and looked at Rosa. 63 years old, cleaning toilets for 11 years, handing over her savings to someone she'd known for 3 years and trusted without question. And Elena cried. Not for herself, for the fact that the only person in this entire company who came to help was the woman with the mop. I need you to understand the mathematics of this moment. Crestfall Capital manages $2.3 billion in assets. Its annual revenue exceeds $400 million. Victor Hale's annual bonus alone was larger than the lifetime earnings of most people watching this video. And when Elena Marsh was thrown out of the building, the woman who uncovered $47 million in fraud, the only person who reached into their pocket was a cleaning woman making minimum wage. Rosa Gutierrez gave Elena $300. That represented a larger percentage of Rosa's net worth than the $47 million represented of Crestfall Capital's. Think about that. The person with the least gave the most. That's not a metaphor. That's America. Nathan called Elena 4 times. She picked up on the 4th. You promised I wouldn't be fired. I know, and I will fix this. You don't need to fix it for me. Fix it for your company. I just need to find another job before rent is due. She hung up. Nathan sat in his penthouse. 4 bedrooms, $340 million in personal assets, and he couldn't keep a promise to a woman with $400 to her name. He drove to Dorchester that evening, parked across from Elena's building, didn't get out. Through the windshield, he watched Elena and Lily walk home from the bus stop. Lily wearing a backpack nearly as big as she was, pointing at something in a puddle. Elena holding her hand, shoulders squared against the wind. He sat in his car for 20 minutes, then drove home. But the image stayed. The small girl with the enormous backpack and the woman who carried everything else. But Victor Hale had not accounted for one thing. Elena had copied everything. 3 USB drives, cloud backup on her personal Google account. Victor could wipe the servers. He couldn't reach into her coat pocket. On a Tuesday afternoon, Elena sat in the Boston Public Library because her apartment didn't have a printer. Lily sat beside her drawing a horse. Elena typed 14 pages. Every transaction documented, every shell company mapped, clean columns, clear headers, no ambiguity, the way her father taught her. She mailed it to FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, U.S. Department of the Treasury, under the whistleblower provisions of the Anti-Money Laundering Act. At the post office, the clerk asked if she wanted tracking. She paid $7.85 for certified mail and tucked the receipt into her father's notebook next to the page that said, "Numbers don't lie." Lily looked up. "Mommy, what did you mail?" "The truth, baby." "Is it heavy?" Elena smiled. "First time in weeks." "Yeah, pretty heavy." Here's what makes this moment extraordinary. Elena didn't wait for Nathan to save her. She didn't wait for a lawyer or a reporter or anyone else to fight her battle. She walked into a public library, sat next to her 6-year-old, and built a federal case on a computer that charged 10 cents a page to print. The Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020, known as the AMLA, created a whistleblower program specifically for situations like this. If your tip leads to a successful enforcement action exceeding $1 million, you can receive up to 30% of the sanctions collected. Elena didn't know about the reward when she mailed the report. She researched the process at the library for 2 nights, but compensation wasn't the point. The point was that her father had taught her numbers don't lie, and she had $7.85 left to prove it. Agent Nora Whitfield called 14 days later, FinCEN and Enforcement Division. She asked Elena to come to the federal building downtown. Whitfield explained FinCEN had been tracking the opioid laundering network for 2 years. They had the offshore accounts. What they'd never found was the domestic entry point, the legitimate company where dirty money entered the system. Elena's report was the missing piece. We need 72 hours to secure federal search warrants. During that time, you cannot contact anyone at Crestfall Capital. Elena looked at the agents at her report covered in red ink at the validation of every number she'd found alone on the 28th floor at 7 p.m. "Yes," she said. 2 days later, Nathan knocked on her apartment door. Lily opened it. "Who are you? Are you Mommy's friend?" Nathan knelt to her level. "Yeah, I'm Mommy's friend." Elena appeared behind Lily. She didn't invite him in. Nathan stepped in anyway, sat at the kitchen table on a chair with a wobbly leg. "I'm not here as the CEO. I owe you an apology. I promised to protect you and I failed." Elena leaned against the counter. "You didn't fail. You just weren't strong enough to keep the promise. I understand the difference." Then she told him she'd sent the report to FinCEN. Nathan went very still. "You did the right thing," he said. 3 words. They sat between them like coins placed on a table. Elena looked at him. "I know." Victor sensed it. Nathan was too quiet. No counter moves. Just silence. And silence from Nathan Crestfall was more dangerous than noise. Victor started transferring assets offshore, instructed Dean to purge records. What he didn't know, Preston and Oakley had backed up everything 3 weeks earlier. Every document Victor deleted still existed on servers in New York. Victor was burning a house whose blueprints had already been copied. Friday morning, 6:47 a.m., 12 VA agents, 4 FinCEN investigators, the 31st floor. Victor was at his desk, coffee steaming. 2 agents read him his Miranda rights. Dean Calloway was arrested at home in Brooklyn, still in his bathrobe. Nathan stood in the corridor and watched them lead Victor out in handcuffs. Victor stopped. 15 years of shared history. He looked at Nathan. "You chose her over me." Nathan held his gaze. "No, she chose the truth. I just followed." "You chose her over me." That's what Victor said, and I think it reveals everything about how he saw the world. To Victor, loyalty was a transaction. You protect the people who protect you and everyone below. The accountants, the analysts, the cleaning staff, they're not people. They're infrastructure. Elena was supposed to be invisible. She was supposed to be a line in a spreadsheet that nobody ever read. The idea that Nathan would believe her over Victor was to Victor incomprehensible. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a violation of the natural order. And that more than anything else is why Victor got caught, because he built a system designed to be invisible to the people above him. He never considered that someone below him might be paying attention. The federal case unfolded over months. Money laundering, securities fraud, obstruction, conspiracy, $47 million through 4 shell companies. Victor's cut, $5.6 million in the Caymans. Dean Calloway pleaded guilty. His testimony revealed that David Huang hadn't quit. He'd been threatened into silence. Victor redirected David's workload to Elena's desk because he needed someone compliant to sit on the evidence. He chose the wrong person. Harrison Cressfall never apologized out loud, but Nathan received a handwritten letter. 3 sentences. I was wrong, you were right. That's the only thing that matters. Nathan drove to Greenwich that weekend. They sat in the study, the same room where Harrison had called him naive and talked about the Red Sox. They talked about the weather. They didn't talk about anything that mattered, which meant they talked about everything that did. When Nathan left, Harrison put a hand on his shoulder and said, "That accountant of yours, she's got more spine than half the people I've worked with in 40 years. Don't let that one go." Nathan was reinstated. Crestfall Capital took a hit, but survived. Elena was certified as a federal whistleblower. When Nathan offered her the position of internal controls manager, she said, "I just need to know I won't lose my job." "You won't, and this time I can keep that promise." On Elena's first day back, she rode the elevator to the 31st floor with her own key card, her name on the door, window overlooking the harbor. She set her father's notebook on the shelf and sat behind a desk that faced the water. Her phone buzzed. "Lily says, good luck. She made you a picture." Rosa Gutierrez was offered a promotion. She declined. "I like my work, but if you want to thank me, treat that girl right." Nathan asked, "You mean Elena?" Rosa looked at him with the patience of a 63-year-old woman who spent 3 decades cleaning up after powerful men. "I mean both of them, Elena and Lily." 2 weeks later, Elena visited Rosa during the evening shift, handed her an envelope, $300, plus a note. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Rosa folded the note, put it in her apron and said, "I told you you'd pay me back." Then hugged Elena so hard her feet almost left the ground. 6 months passed. They ate lunch together every Thursday. Nathan started picking Lily up when Elena ran late, reading her picture books, sitting on the floor assembling IKEA furniture, while Lily directed like a field marshal. One evening, Lily gave Nathan a drawing. 3 stick figures in front of a house with a red door and yellow flowers. Same house she'd always drawn, but now there were 3 people instead of 2. Nathan put it on his refrigerator, first thing he'd put there in 4 years. The next Thursday, Nathan mentioned the drawing. Elena said she draws what she wants to be real. Nathan said, "Me too, apparently. I keep looking at it." Elena took a bite of her sandwich. "Don't read too much into it. She also drew one where she's riding a dinosaur." Nathan laughed, an actual laugh, the kind that surprised him because he'd forgotten what it felt like. A Thursday night, late autumn, Lily asleep, Elena reading at the kitchen table. Nathan sat across from her. Same chair, same wobbly leg. "I'm not good at saying things that aren't in spreadsheets." Elena closed her book. "Before I met you, I thought the most important thing I had was the company. Now I know the most important thing is being allowed to sit in this chair." Elena looked at him for a long time. She opened the drawer, took out her father's notebook, turned to the last page. "Below, numbers don't lie, Elena. Only people do," she'd written in pencil. "But sometimes people learn to tell the truth, too." She slid the notebook across the table. Nathan read both lines, looked up. "I don't trust you completely yet," Elena said, "but I'm trying." Nathan smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. "That's enough." 1 year later, Sunday morning, a small house in Concord, not a mansion, 2 bedrooms, a garden, a red front door. Nathan painting the fence in an old t-shirt. Lily chasing a golden retriever named Biscuit through the yard. Elena stood in the doorway holding coffee. She looked at the ring on her left hand, not a diamond, a thin silver band, 1 word engraved inside, enough. On the bookshelf, her father's notebook stood next to Lily's first drawing of the house with the red door. The drawing that was once a dream, the notebook that was once a warning. Now just 2 things in a home that belonged to people who had earned it. One number, one truth, one ordinary act of courage at a time. Elena took a sip of coffee and stepped into the sunlight. Behind her, she could hear Lily shrieking with laughter as Biscuit licked her face. Nathan was saying the fence paint was the wrong shade of white. Lily was informing him with absolute authority that it was the right shade because she had picked it. Elena stood on the porch and listened to her family. The word family still new in her mouth, still surprising every time she used it. Argue about paint. The sun was warm on her face. The coffee was good. The numbers for once in her life all added up. And sometimes the truth doesn't need a hero. It just needs one person brave enough to look at the numbers and refuse to look away. But here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments. How many Elena Marshes are out there right now, sitting on the 28th floor of some company, staring at a number that doesn't add up, wondering if anyone would believe them if they spoke up? How many of them stay quiet? Not because they don't see it, but because they have a daughter to feed and $400 to their name. The system isn't broken because bad people exist. It's broken because good people can't afford to be brave. Elena could barely, and it cost her almost everything. If this story stayed with you, hit that subscribe button. Every day we bring you stories like this one. Real people, real courage, real consequences. I'll see you in the next.